can go.
Okay, so I went and plucked 3 things of basil. This is one of the 3, and here's another one, but the third one I've already taken here. And just so you know how I like to cut up basil, that's a standard way to do it, is you just put all the leaves together like this and just sort of roll them together, and then you can cut them really thinly just by going along like this. And I'll go back across them. This is a really great way if you're going to put them over tomatoes or something like that. But it also gets it finely cut and ready to go into the bread. And yeah, there we go. And then just for tomatoes, this would be fine. But for the bread, I'm going to take it and go across it a little bit just to make sure everything's somewhat cut up. I'm not so concerned that everything is perfect. I'm more concerned that it's just generally where it needs to be. So we'll cut up the rest of it. You can see the onion's been cut up here. We have the basil, the oregano here, which is dried because we had to harvest it before the, we can take a look right inside. I harvested it just before the freeze came. So that will just sort of have to crush because it's pretty dried. That'll just be crushed. And then for garlic, I tend to use just the minced garlic out of a jar, but if you have fresh garlic, the only caution I have is that fresh garlic, oh my, it can be so pungent. You don't recognize how strong it can be, but it's great if you, and I love garlic, so that's not a problem. So, okay. So we have the 4 extra ingredients for the no-knead bread here. We have garlic, the dried oregano from the garden, but I chopped it up, and you can see it's kind of, it's some coarser and some finer, and if you're really into it, you can do better. And fresh oregano is wonderful if you've got it, but I just don't because of that. It's not the fresh season. Here's the basil that is fresh, but it's the stuff that we kept inside. And here's all the onions. So what we're going to do is toss all of this into a bowl and mix it together. So that goes in. We'll put the basil in. Don't want to lose any of it, especially this time of year when basil is hard to come by. Then we'll figure out how to get all the oregano in as best we can so we don't lose any of that. And what I've done in the winter sometimes is I just, instead of worrying about the oregano and the basil, I just use something like, I've mentioned herb de Provence, or you can use Italian seasoning or something like that, whatever strikes your interest the most. And then finally, I'm going to come up with the garlic, and I just use this minced garlic. And does that look like a lot of garlic? Well, it is, but I'm going to take a little bit more even because I'm making 4 loaves. This is all for 4 loaves. This isn't just a singular loaf. Then what we're going to do, there it all is, and we'll just mix it all together. Try to make it so that we have it as mixed now so that we don't have a problem later with having to mix it. This is one of the mixing bowls that I'll be using for seeing things rise. But for now, I think that looks about as mixed as it's going to get. You can see it all in there. Now, next step is to take this and distribute it. So we'll get to that in just a minute. To distribute this just somewhat, I mean, we don't have to be exact here. You can measure if that makes you feel better. But this is, to me, kind of where we ought to be. With all of those different ones, it's pretty evenly distributed. Maybe I'll take a little out of this one and put it in this one just to make us feel better. The next step is going to be, one of these we're going to use some 3 cheese blend. Now, a lot of times I use Parmesan cheese instead, but this is what I have, so this is what we're going to use. We'll do it in the big bowl over here. So I'm going to use a 1/2 cup. There's a 1/4 cup. And then here's a half cup, more or less. And this is, some people talk about weighing the ingredients to get it exactly right. You know, I've never done that, and the bread comes out just fine. I think maybe it's for people that don't feel that they can get things exactly as they ought to be, but I've never figured out that it has made a major difference in how my bread turns out. The important thing, and we'll get to that in a few moments, is how much water you put in. If you get everything else about right, the water can depend on whether it's summer, whether it's winter, the humidity in the air, the moisture content in the flour to start with, all these kind of things. That's more important to know than the exact amounts of everything else. In my experience, at least. I'm not an experienced baker, so you should take that for what it's worth. But next thing we're going to do is add in all the other ingredients. Now, one of the things I want to also, well, we will get to that in just a minute. I'm going to pull out the flour and stuff and be ready to do that. Okay, we've done 3 of the 4 bowls, the ones without cheese in them, but I put the cheese in here and then in the break, and took it and mixed it all together. But now we need to add the 3 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And as I said, I'm not too concerned about the exact weight and measuring. I just want to pretty much make sure I don't get any big air pockets in the in the measuring cups. So there's 3, and now the 1/4 is like that. Now the next thing we're going to add in is the salt, and we're going to put 2 tablespoons in. Now let me mention something about salt. A lot of times we think the salt's here to be as a to make the things taste a little saltier. Put my glasses on so I can see better. Well, what it's actually doing is retarding the yeast so that when we let it go overnight, it doesn't just go too fast overnight. The slowness is what gives it a lot of the flavor, the slow rising. So one of the things I'll mention is if you happen to be in a climate or a location that's high altitude, bread isn't going to work. As you know, baking in general causes problems in high altitudes. You have to adjust recipes. And in this particular case, interestingly, the problem that you run into with the bread is that it rises too fast at high altitudes. So you need to retard the rising. And the way you can do that is twofold. One is by putting in, instead of 2 tablespoons of sugar, put in 3. And instead of using the 1/4 teaspoon of, this is the yeast I'm using, just quick rise yeast, standard stuff. Instead of using the 1/4, you'll use a little less than a 1/4. Some people want to use not the instant yeast, but the regular active yeast. And let me show you what that is. If I can get the top on this well. So we've all seen these packets around, and this is the not quick rise stuff, which works just fine. Some would suggest that you need to first put it in the water so that the water can activate it. But when you're going for a long period of time, I don't know that I've ever found that it really makes that much difference. So the big thing to be aware of is if you leave yeast and salt together, the salt will kill the yeast. So you want to be a little careful with that you don't get too crazy along those lines. Otherwise, you may end up with a difficulty. And then the final step here, I'm going to whisk. And what I'll be doing is just whisking the ingredients together. You can use a fork, you can do whatever you want to on this, but the idea is to get everything fairly well blended before we start adding the water, which is the last step for today. If we don't, we trust ourselves to mix everything well when we put the water in, and I just don't have that confidence that I'll want to do that. And by the way, as with a lot of baking, you don't want to over stir things once you start activating them and getting them going. Like with biscuits, biscuits you don't stir them forever. You kind of ruin them if you do. So in this case, I'm just taking all these dry ingredients, and you could argue that the fresh basil is anything but dry, and that the garlic is not dry, and yeah, fine, okay, whatever. The big thing here is just to get it largely all put together that way. Let's put this here. And you can see there's the yeast and the salt and the flour, and then here's some other ingredients, so we'll just mix them all together. The high altitude stuff, the other thing I might mention besides putting in more salt and maybe less yeast, you sort of have to try and figure out what's going to happen. I've been doing this I did this at the Denver elevation, so a mile high, and that's where I found success in going to 3 teaspoons of salt, and then maybe slightly less yeast. But the other thing is water. In that situation, I added just a slight amount more of water. So you might call it actually just a tablespoon of water, because that was necessary for getting the ingredients to not be too dry. And again, trying to not get things to rise too quickly was the goal. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to add water to these, and to do that, I am going to just take all of these and put them over by the sink here. We're doing some butternut squash things today, so that's there. What I find is a really useful tool, and we'll use this tomorrow, is just the white plastic spoon. And the plastic is important tomorrow because I'll be stirring with the handle, and you don't want the wooden handle where everything sticks to the handle. It'll stick a little bit, not tremendously so. Let's see, here are my other things. So I am going to look for somewhat warm water. This is I'm using kind of lukewarm water. And that's not bad. It can just be cold water too. Again, it's going to get to room temperature because you're going to let it sit. So let's see. But the yeast likes slightly warmer water. You don't want to get too hot though. Okay, if you can kind of look at how much I'm getting here. See, it's not quite full, so I could tell you that this is a little less than a cup, and it's probably a cup and 7/8. And when I put two of these in every I don't know, in each bowl here. And what's going to be really important isn't the exact amount that I get here. Don't overdo it, because it's hard to take water out, but you can underdo it, and then it will be fine. And I'll just get all these lined up. Check the water every now and then. Make sure it doesn't get too hot. And now I've got all the water, the almost 2 cups in each one, and I'm going to just add fill this one up because I'll be using it along the way here. So let's start with the big one over here where you can see it really well, because you don't need to see all of these done this way, but we'll stir it together. The goal here is to have everything wet. You don't want any dry ingredients as we're doing this. So mix it all together, and when people have talked about no-knead bread, they say that the dough should be shaggy. What does shaggy mean? So let me show you what it's not, in my mind, at least my experience. This looks okay, but it's a little dry. That's fine, because I can add water, and I'll just put in just a little bit there. Doesn't take very much, and I sort of have a little gauge that if I have much in the way of dry ingredients still down in the bottom, then I'm going to need more water. And you can see that this is starting to get where I want it to be. All the dry ingredients are pretty much gone. I'm going to just add just the slightest bit more water. See, it's just not much. That would maybe be a teaspoon, maybe slightly more. But as I go around with this, This is what I'm looking for, this kind of consistency. It's a little bit wet, but not real wet. Set that aside for the moment and take the next one. And what we're going to find, hopefully, since we did everything pretty much the same, except for the big bowl that I just did had the cheese in it, what we're going to find is that it's going to just take a little bit more water. And you can already see this is looking just slightly dry. So I'll put a little dollop in there, which is probably what I put in was, in this case, a couple of tablespoons worth. But again, I'm less interested in the exact measurements and more interested in the consistency that it comes out with. In this case, you can see that it's nice and sticky, and the dry ingredients are pretty much gone from the bottom of the bowl. This is kind of like what you'd get with biscuit dough, I think. Though I'm not a big biscuit maker, that's kind of what I envisioned biscuit dough to be. Now I've got some nice tops over here for these particular bowls because you want to cover these. I'll have to use some kind of plastic wrap on this one because I don't have a top for that one. And we'll just keep mixing these things up. What we're going to do next is let them sit. 12 to 18 hours seems to be what people like. The longer you let it sit, the better your results as far as flavor goes. And so in this case, if we, right now we started working on this about 2:30 in the afternoon, so probably around 8 in the morning is when we'll get together again and we'll do the knockdown, the proofing phase, as I understand it's called. And I'm not a bread aficionado. See, this is about right, but it's just a little bit more. We'll just bring this to a perfect place from my experience. By the way, if you get it too wet, the problem is I find it sticks to the bowls. When you cook it in the oven, bake it in the oven, it sticks, and you don't want to do that. So let's see, this one has its top over here. Excellent. And then the final one. So tomorrow when we come to work on all of this, we'll be coming at it to knock it down. It'll rise pretty well. We'll knock it down, and then we'll coat it. Well, when we do the knockdown with cornmeal. I'll show you that tomorrow. The question also might be, well, what kind of temperature should I be doing this? Rising. Should I have it rise at a little warmer, like on top of the refrigerator? Is it okay if it's a little colder? Colder is going to make it rise less quickly than warmer. And that's not necessarily bad. Again, take your time. Some have suggested, put just little yeast in it, and if you're not going to use it right away, you can let it rise in the refrigerator, I think I've seen. And they say, it's amazingly good flavor that way. This one is at the edge of too much water. I got a little aggressive there on the water, but it's okay. That's not going to be a problem. So we've got all of these done now, and now we just have to wait until tomorrow morning. I'll go for the 18 hours. I don't know what happens if you go too long. Never really thought about it, but get the dough off my fingers, and we'll be ready to go tomorrow. So that's it for now. Put the covers on everything, set it in the corner, and come back in a while. And I'll have this spoon, I'll just wash it off now so that we're ready to go with it later on, in other words in the morning, so I can use it to knock things down. But we'll show you everything else in the morning. For now, that's it.